This is my journey. Inspired one story at a time, a library of leaders was created. It began as a journey to learn. As time went on, it began to grow. All it needed was a platform, and this podcast was created to listen, to inspire, to share. I am a storyteller, and this is my journey. Welcome to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. I'm your host, Steve Anderson, and today our guest is Crispin Thompson, who has spent more than 25 years shaping how people lead, communicate, and grow. In senior roles at Hewlett Packard Enterprises, TaskUs, and QSC, he managed large international teams and drove major transformational programs. Experiences that revealed how easily careers stall when strong managers are promoted without the confidence or presence to step fully into leadership. That observation became the foundation for the Leadership Studio, which Crispin helps leaders bridge the gap between how they see themselves and how others experience them. His coaching focuses on practical shifts that carry real weight in the room, learning to project calm under pressure, making decisions when information is incomplete, and moving past the perfectionism that undermines confidence. He often draws on his own missteps or on vivid historical examples, turning abstract ideas into stories and exercises that leave a lasting mark. So, Crispin, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on today.
I am super happy to be here.
So, give us a little context here. I always like to start with that. Tell us a little bit about, where you're from, where you grew up, and kind of how you got into this leadership role that you're currently in.
Sure. So these days I am based in San Antonio, Texas. In terms of where I grew up, I grew up in a lot of places.
Okay.
I was born in Louisiana. My family has deep historic ties to Louisiana. In fact, I think I'm probably the last. I think my little brother was the first person to not be born in Louisiana. In fact, for a long time. But we moved around a lot when I was younger. So I lived in a bunch of states in the South, and then we moved to Illinois, and then I was in Indiana before returning back to Texas about I don't know 13, 14 years ago.
Okay.
So been around, seen a few things, did some rotations, lived and worked outside of the country for a little while as well. But you kind of asked, like, where did all these things start? So I was with HP for a long time, 25 years. And while I kind of grew up there and saw a bunch of things, I was blessed to have some good coaches and mentors along the way that were blunt enough to get through to me and kind of get in my ear when I needed it. And then when I started to gain positions of influence myself, I saw that I could help others, and I really enjoyed doing it. I think I maybe in another life I was meant to be a teacher or something. Right? So I really
Yeah.
enjoyed that aspect. And this thing that was always a kind of a thing I did on the side as part of my job, or I always jokingly called it my work hobby, became really like the seed was planted. Maybe this is the thing I should do. And then a couple of years ago, I was at an inflection point about where do I want the next phase to be? Do I want to continue to pursue more leadership roles in corporate America, or do I want to make this bet on myself and try? It was just the thing that I love doing, that thing I think I'm meant to do. Can I just go do it? And that's where the Leadership Studio was born.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So in the bio we talked, you mentioned that that leadership stalls when promotion happens. So tell us a little bit about what that means, and what is that statement all about?
I think about there's different phases in careers as people are kind of progressing through the career ladder and such, and they're kind of getting bigger and bigger roles. When you move from roles that are more focused on individual contribution into a manager role, there's it's often your knowledge that got you there. Like you demonstrated you could do the job well, and then you're promoted and now you're a people manager, but managing people and managing tasks is pretty different. And and the same happens when you go from being a manager to being a director, because now you're managing managers and teams of things. And same thing when you go from director to VP, and now you're managing an organization or a business or something. And so what I see happen so often is that, especially big companies, they have all of the best intentions where they're they're really pleased to show the promotional pathways and the number of people that have grown, but especially I think when you make the jump from manager to director and then the big jump from director to VP, there's there's a perception that if we saw you as ready, that you're just going to know what to do from day one, hour one, and it's so seldomly true. Some people are naturals at it, but most of us, we need to figure things out. And unfortunately, when you the bigger your role, the bigger the impact is as you're figuring things out. If you do the something that's not as well as you want, or you just do the wrong thing, that impact is so much bigger, right? And so where I see is that right when in the first, let's say, month 0 to month 24 of people kind of moving into these kind of newer and bigger roles, it's they're shaping how they're going to be as a leader, and they're often not provided with the tools from their company, and that's again all the best intentions, but who has the time and the money and the effort, right, to go into those things. And so people are left to figure it out on their own. Sometimes they have great mentors, or they can seek out things, but we like to help fill that gap a little bit here at the Leadership Studio.
It's so interesting to me. I've said this many, many times. This is a podcast about leadership, so I've made this statement before, but leadership is the one thing that goes across every single business, every single career, and so I don't understand why we don't embrace it more, like kind of the task-oriented stuff or the basics. Like, shouldn't we be teaching leadership in grade school and middle school and high school and all this kind of stuff? And then you say, even when you get into big companies, a lot of them have leadership programs, but they may not be as good as they could be. So it's just one of those things that I guess people just assume that you either have or you don't have. And I think both you and I agree that you really need to work at it, train it, and practice.
Yeah, not just practice, but keep practicing, right? I think it's we need to practice to be better, but just like if let's say, pick football, for example, if you could pluck out a person who was successful playing in the NFL in the 80s and somehow transport them to now, they might not be as successful. The game has changed so much in that time frame. And leadership evolves too, right? The tools around us evolve. Each successive workforce generation is different. So leaders need to think differently about how do we lead, how do we motivate, how do we get them there. So it's not just practice, but keep practicing. And I think it, and I just could not agree more with what you said there.
So how do we assess, when a leader is effective? So like when you see people that are in these roles and I mean, it might be a basic question, and some of us might say, well, geez, either you see it or you don't see it. But are there ways to assess whether a person is being an effective leader?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think about. A lot of companies will, of course, have some sort of employee survey or a leadership performance index or something like this. And there's always, leadership effectiveness that kind of goes in. People are answering questions, and you can semi-empirically pull out a score there. Okay, you got a 90, so you're great, or you got a 75, you need some work, kind of thing. So there's ways to look at that, but less empirically, I look at organizations that if if the organization is going through churn and change and the people feel calm and motivated, that tells me that the leader has done their job, right? They have kept them informed, they're making them feel seen and heard, and they're connecting. The inverse is true too, right? If an organization is going through churn, change, or worse yet, the organization is just fine, but the people seem agitated and unhappy, that tells me the leadership is disconnected. And so I think there's kind of ways to see it the other way that's always super interesting is when a leader leaves, what happens? Does the organization continue to perform at the same level? Do you see people want to kind of pick up and migrate with the person? That's what a great feeling as a leader when you've got people that want to follow you from organization or even companies, right? To because they so believe in you as a leader that they're willing to change their take risk in their personal finance or whatever. So I think those are different ways for us to see that play out in real life too.
I can remember, a few decades ago where there was a feeling that if a leader left a company, as you suggested, and then the company just continued on strong without the leader, that was all the people would look at that as a sign of weakness, saying, well, they must not have needed that leader if it's continuing to go. I would argue the total opposite of that, that a good leader prepares people to continue on without them, and the one that leaves and the company or the department doesn't miss a beat is probably the leader who did his homework and did the best job of helping others learn and grow.
Yeah, and prepared those around them for the ability to step up into, when that leader leaves. It's the same thing. Like we see, when a leader goes on vacation, what happens? Do things just wait a week or 2 weeks, or do they continue on? Or do you have the leader that just checks in 10 times a day when they're on vacation, which having done that a few times in my life, I understand that feeling and inclination, but it's also a terrible precedent to set, right? Because then people feel like if Chris does it, then I have to be doing it too, and we need our downtime. So I think that plays out as well.
Yeah, I can remember too going away to conferences or long meetings or whatever, and I was with other leaders, and every break and every moment of, outside of the meeting of the conference, people would be on their phone checking in with their people and doing things. And I kind of never did. And I kind of got teased about it. Don't you care? I mean, aren't you checking in with your group or whatever? I said, no, they're doing what they need to do and they'll call me if they need me type of thing. So again, different approach.
Yeah, and there's no one right or wrong way, but it's funny that we're having this conversation because I was just reminded of this just yesterday. I was hearing an example about, there are these leaders that pride themselves on the number of hours they're logged in, and they'll say, oh, I wake up at 5 and I'm online by 5:15, and you're seeing emails come across, all during the day, or pings on Teams or whatnot, and I'm not taking away from that individual in terms of, sure, they're dedicated, but the the opposite can be true too. Like you're creating this impression with your teams now that this is the expectation, or gosh, in order for me to be successful at that level, I've got to get up at 5 and be online by 5:15. And then what happens is there'll be some people who were very capable of growing who will see that as that's the standard, that's what I have to live to, and they don't want that.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in being the person that's connected 20 of 24 hours a day, sort of thing. And we, even though we're trying to show our teams, I'm so dedicated, you can reach me any hour of the day. What we're also telling our teams is you need to be reachable any hour of the day. And we're already too connected as society. Yes, it is.
I a guest in a previous episode here, not that long ago, who's worked with, many, many, many CEOs, basically made the statement that I thought was really interesting. And they said that the little secret is that the best CEOs aren't that busy.
Hmm.
It's the ones that, aren't as effective, aren't as good that are working those, 100-hour weeks and, up, doing things at all times of the night and whatever. But the really good ones, they've done their homework, they've prepared their people, and, they have time to not be as busy as you might think they would be.
Yeah, I think when I have been happiest and the most successful point in my career was also, it's because I had my team running at such a good level and I had so much trust in the leaders beneath me that I actually could relax. I had a boss who put a lot of trust in his team. When he came in, he told me, he said, by the way, especially in the summer, I don't expect you working past 2 p.m. or maybe even noon on Friday. He said, I'm going to go play golf. You should go play golf. And having that kind of expectation set was also great too. He meant it at least partially sarcastically, so I understood that was okay. But giving permission to, it's okay to live a life. It's okay to, that if you want to have a little extra time with your family or just go pick up 18 holes, that we're going to understand. The world can't break in that time frame. We understand that too, but you do the right thing and the right things will come along to you.
So every company would love to have a bunch of leaders, in the pipeline ready to go at any time. So that anything happens, we've got somebody to go. So how do you help companies build these pipelines or build uh, these pools of people ready to go?
It starts with a company has to be willing to acknowledge that they need help building, right? I think that's the you talked before about kind of like leadership programs and things, and certain companies do that. And sure, most, if not maybe all, big companies do that, but they do it for, a very like a subsection of a subsection. So it's always like a high potential or a top talent program. So it's already your top 1 or 2%. And I believe that everyone needs good coaching to help kind of develop to their potential, but that's the group that probably was going to get there mostly anyway, right? Because they were already the top talent, already the most highly motivated. And so I think the expanding the pool a little bit, I think, companies have to acknowledge that they need the help. So start with I need help. And I think that's a great conversation. And then be willing to free up time, right? Because this doesn't happen, it doesn't happen as an email, and it doesn't happen as a one-off call. So they've got to free up the time of their people to have, to receive coaching or to go through, sessions or even an in-person thing over a couple of days. And then those people have to feel like they can be present in the room. So I think there's a permission setting that needs to come from companies that, okay, we're investing X number of dollars and hours, and you're going to be at an offsite for 3 days. And while you're there, we want you there. And we'll trust that the work will keep getting done. But like you said, the people that have to step out at every break, they've got to be on their phones and checking back in. If that's how every person is in the room, then you also have to believe that 5 minutes before the break, 10 minutes before the break, they're already thinking about who do they need to call, what do they need to do next. And so they're missing core components of the learning in those moments. So, acknowledge that you need help, create the pathway, create the time frame, create the permission for people that are going to go through the sessions to be in the sessions and learn, and then make that true. One thing I would say as well is, if you're going to put people through a program to make them eligible for leadership, then I would hope there's a real plan for leadership roles to be open. There's a few things that are more discouraging at big companies than when a group gets told you're going to be at the next level, we're putting you through this program, and then ta-da, there's no
It never
roles. Right?
never
Yeah.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a million factors, right? There could be major macroeconomic things, right, that could apply, and I think it's companies need to mitigate against intentions, and try to make sure that they have some kind of demonstrable action that goes along with that. And then, more tangibly, we like to sit down with folks that are either in the pipeline or already there, and we talk to them. We get a good sense of kind of where they are on a baseline. We put a very heavy premium on communication at the Leadership Studio, because I very firmly believe that you can be maybe a good leader and a mediocre communicator, but you can't be a great leader and without also being a great communicator, because
Agreed. Yeah.
that's about message delivery. It's landing, the right signal at the right time. It's connecting with your audience. It's getting people through tough times, which is also, super, the creating empathetic links and connection with audiences. And so we do assessments, and we look at all like where people are, because it helps us understand where to focus the time and coaching. And then with the company, we'd want to create some sort of metric or baseline that we can help kind of track and show progress against. Because for sure, if a company is investing in me to help them, I want to show them what they're getting from their investment as well, because I think that's the people will feel it, but the company needs to see it too. Otherwise, there's not a second time for me to go back in there and help.
I think that's interesting when you brought up that, so many companies just focus on this 1 or 2%, and the people might get there anyway, or, be in a position to do that. But how do you, I go back to the theory of lead from any level,
Mhm.
so how do you find these emerging leaders? How do you find people that could broaden that small group? And even very early in their career, or just when they're starting, how do you identify those people and get them into a program?
You know, it's not easy, right? Because you everything moves so quickly these days. And there's such a premium on speed and efficiency that it's difficult to be willing to slow something down so that you have the opportunity to have good interactions. So when people are at the beginning of their careers, we would look for people that are either naturally stepping up or volunteering for new things, because in order to be a leader, you have to be willing to kind of step out of your comfort zone. We would look for, if they're in a maybe a partner or customer facing role, we would look for people that are kind of naturally showing really high aptitude in that area. Because if you can interface with customers or partners, and those interactions aren't always as amazing day to day as we want them to be, and can handle that well, then you're kind of showing the some of the like emotional intelligence and things that we would really want to see as kind of groundwork for the potential for effective leadership as they grow their careers. And then, where we can, where we're allowed, we like to use like tools. We have a leadership assessment that we can apply and let people kind of self-evaluate, and that gives us a good indication of kind of where people are. But we also like to talk to the companies. Like, what are you looking for? Each company is different. Each ethos at every company is different. So what do you as a company value in leaders? And hopefully they give me two answers, because everything's changing so quickly. I would want a company to say, today what we value is this, but we know tomorrow we need that. And that's always very helpful, because it allows us to help prepare our process and method and approach, but also make sure the company is aware of what that means. If today we need leaders that are blunt and direct, and tomorrow we need leaders that can deal with ambiguity and all that. That's a big shift, right? That's a Not everyone that's in these roles today can make it to tomorrow. So we need people to companies to internalize that as well, and kind of help understand what does the change curve of that look like over time, and hopefully get an indication of what that time is. So there's a lot of components, but the more openness and transparency that companies can have, whether they're going to give it to us or they're going to do it themselves, and truly kind of looking at it and talking to people. And it's got to be more than just what was their daily
Yeah.
output. It's got to be looking at, how do we truly understand the potential of the individual. And then I also think it helps us to ask individuals, what do you want to do with your career? And and for everyone that says I want to be a manager, then we need to ask why. And because there's going to be a percentage of them that say I want to be a manager because I understand that's the biggest pay bump or something, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but the that cannot be the purest motivation for wanting to get to the next level. So we want to make sure that we, of that percentage, how many of them are really the ones that we want to go lead, and some of them, so we can show them other career paths that maybe take them away from feeling that the only way to get paid is to have a manager in your title.
Yeah, and we've seen it all happen before. You can't just look at the metrics too, because how many times, as you mentioned, that somebody gets a promotion or gets put into a manager role or a management position because of great performance at what the job they did before, but that doesn't necessarily translate to, managing people and being a great leader. So I think companies make that mistake a lot.
It's hard to not make that mistake, right? Especially in core functions of big companies. If you've got someone that truly knows the book of work back to front, they're the logical choice, because that's going to be the easiest transition to keep the work going when you pull that person out of their role. But motivating individuals to move to a shared outcome or to deliver the right impact is different than, I know how to massage the process, and make sure the output is X or the error rate is Y or whatever. So it is indeed different. I'm not saying you can't be great at a function and also great as a leader, but it's not a slam dunk from one to two.
And I wonder too if, if you talk about pay structures and then I'm going to make more money if I'm a manager or whatever, the willingness to look at that high performer doing the job they do, and as opposed to promoting them to a job that they're not as good at, you just find a structure where they can make more money doing more of what they're doing, as opposed to, moving them into a position where they're less effective. And, I know pay structures are always complicated, but, that would make sense where, it may be that some high producers in sales or other areas of the company may actually make more money than the people that are managing others.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said the word sales too, because that was in my head, is that that's probably the best example where we see that someone that's great at a task may not be the person who's meant to kind of drive the team or lead the organization to the next level of achievement. Someone who is an amazing salesperson does not necessarily mean they're going to be a great sales coach or sales leader. I, there was a particular role that I saw at one of the companies I was at where year after year, the name in the box was different. And they would throw some absurd number at that person to say, here's going to be the compensation. But I was thinking, you're just getting it for a year. They seem to just they go after the highest performer in the salesperson. They say, now you run the whole thing. And I think that's such a shift. Selling to leading is such a shift. And I see many companies, make the same error, because what's also true is if you take someone who was in sales who maybe wasn't a great performer, but you see in them the ability to lead and perform, they also have a credibility gap with their salesperson. The first time the salesperson who's generally good is having a down month or down quarter, and their leader is talking to them how to be better, and they say, yeah, but you couldn't sell anything. Like you have
Yeah.
you have this credibility gap immediately. So it's a tough position to be in for sure.
Yeah, and that's a good example. It good, brings back the Jim Collins thing, the right person in the right seat of the bus. So,
Hmm.
you can you might make the argument again, there's huge variation, so you can't say this like on a blanket, but you can sometimes make the argument that someone who's really, really good at sales may be really bad at managing people because the skill sets are very different. I mean, a salesperson is hard charging and aggressive and, and doing things in a certain way that maybe managing people doesn't work as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's sometimes it happens. And then it's even great. Like when all of the stars align and you get someone who was really good at sales and they're really good at sales leader, those organizations are amazing, like
Yeah.
really amazing. But you also see amazing sales organizations from someone who wasn't maybe the top salesperson coming through, and which is maybe another way to say that you should look for rotation or even look for outside sometimes to bring in to run a sales org.
So how are we looking at now with, the hybrid workforce that we have now? And, I think maybe an older school approach would be that, everybody needs to be together so that we can collaborate and have this cross-cultural experience and whatever. In the hybrid work situations we have now, there isn't as much as that. Are you concerned about that? What's your opinion on people working from home more or on their own more than they have in the past?
I'm I'm concerned about it when the leader isn't trying to actively work to engage the teams and make sure that they feel seen and connected and help foster the collaboration. So I agree that when we are all together in an office and we can see each other, that like these happy accidents that occur, right? You happen to hear over the wall someone talk about something that you yourself were thinking about, and collaboratively you help get to an answer, and it gets to an answer faster. And I think on paper, that's the right way to do things. The the reality though is that that's just not how it plays out so often. And the other thing we always tend to just forget about is when especially now when it's hybrid. So you're in the office some days and not in the office some days. For every bit of productivity increase we're getting, we're actually losing as well, because you haven't seen these people for a few days. Oh, let's catch up. Oh, let's grab a coffee. Oh, there's the gossip or chit chat. So these human connections that are valuable and play out over long term, you lose in the immediate term as well. And so I think that gets forgotten. So I think the risk is not in the people. The risk is not in the people doing the work, right? So whether you work remotely fully, whether you work in an office fully, you can have, if your leader is disconnected, your leadership is disconnected, the leaders aren't working to make sure that that the teams feel connected to one another, they feel connected to the business, to the organization, to the leadership, then it doesn't matter if you can walk over and shake their hand or you're going to see them in 6 months at the next all employee event, right? That you're still going to have the same disconnects. In fact, they might even happen faster, if everyone's in the office. So the onus then falls back to the leader. They have to work harder in a remote environment, in a hybrid environment. The leader has to work harder to make sure that people are being seen, that they're feeling like they're being seen, to work to make sure that you're driving those kind of core connections, that there's a good, open, free communication, because that's the other nice thing that happens in an office environment, that if you've got a problem, you can walk over and talk to your boss. Your boss just sees it and they see you're having a bad day. That's to me, that's like the biggest loss in remote environments. But if you coach your leaders to be more empathetic, to kind of lead with emotional intelligence, and really, be human, then I think it doesn't matter as much, right? You can be fully remote and still have great outcomes. You can be fully remote and still have a team that feels as connected, and you don't lose much without going into the office.
Yeah. I heard a story during the pandemic that there was a leader that was saying that now that everybody's home, the the Zoom and the email and the text just aren't working as well as what we're used to, seeing each other in the office and having those conversations. So his solution to that was just get in the car and drive to people's homes, and they would be on the front porch and he'd be on the sidewalk, 20 feet apart, but they would at least have a face-to-face talk. And I thought that was brilliant, because again, that connectiveness, that belonging, that feeling that we're still together is really important.
And if you're in the same geographic zone, I think
Yeah.
that's realistic. I was with Hewlett Packard Enterprise during COVID, and at at that point in my career, maybe a year or so after COVID started, I didn't have any employees in the U.S. anymore. Everyone I had was everywhere else. So driving to be in front of someone's house was
That
not a
was,
not a possibility for me. But what
yeah.
we did was we tried to humanize what did remote work mean, because if you had been so used to being in the office 100% of the time, it's very likely that you didn't have a workspace, you didn't have a desk, you didn't have an office, and maybe you've got, because of the pandemic, you've got kids that are doing remote learning at home, and
Yeah.
pets that you're not used to dealing with. So we try to really humanize that. So, send me a picture. Let's show it in an all employee meeting. Show me how do you work? How do you cope with that? And at least for a while. And remember, at the beginning of COVID, we thought that was going to be a weeks or months kind of
Yes.
thing, not a defining moment of our lifetime. And but it gave us really interesting perspectives on how are people living their lives and work life in those moments as well.
So tell me a little bit. In doing some research for this, I found out that you are involved in Make-A-Wish Foundation. So tell us, a little bit about that charity and what you do and what that gives to you.
So I was with Make a Wish for 3 years. I'm not with them today, but I'll happily talk great things about Make a Wish of Central and South Texas. So the Make a Wish Foundation, the national side of this, is exactly what everyone thinks, right? It's when there's kids who are very critically ill, and potentially even dying, that we help ease the burden. We help kind of bring joy into the lives of the families, give them something to look forward to in the face of other things. And so I had this amazing opportunity to sit on the governing board of the Make-A-Wish Foundation of Central and South Texas. And we focused here, and a lot of that happened during COVID as well. And the as as a parent, right? There's very few things in life that are harder than seeing your child sick or injured or hurt, right? And for me to see all these other families dealing with this, it's every single wish that would come up. If there was a shortage in funding, you're like, I'm ready to write a check. I'm ready to help out, because every single one, really feels amazing to help out. And what, as a human, ignore anything about leadership, but as a human, what I found amazing about the Make a Wish foundation and what it did, were the individual wishes themselves, because often you would find, and I pre-apologize if I get emotional because I do sometimes on these topics, but often you would find that the child was who was sick and who had the wish was making a wish for their brother or their sister, or like because they felt
Wow.
like they had been such a burden, and so they were asking for like a, instead of going to Disney, they wanted to do like a backyard makeover that would have a swing and a play set, knowing that they themselves can't do it, but it's for their brother who's always by their side or sister who's always by their side. And the other thing I would say, and I won't use the name because I want to respect privacy, but the there's a lot of examples in life of people that we see who are famous, and then you learn a little bit more about them and you're just disappointed, right? You just
Yeah.
this person's no good. But there
Yeah.
was a very very famous singer, and the request from, this was during COVID, so nothing could be in person. The request was, the person, the wish kid just wanted to meet and have a conversation with the singer. And so they ended up doing a Zoom call, and we had it scheduled for an hour. It took a long time just to kind of work to find who's the right person to talk to, and work through all those things. And I say we, but I should give full credit to the members of Make a Wish of Central South Texas, right? Because they're the ones that do all the work and make the magic happen. But found the person and got them connected, and they agreed to talk. And instead of it being a 1 hour, ended up being like a 3 hour thing, which in and of itself is amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then that person stayed in the Wish Kids' life until the end, and would routinely check in on them, call them in, and I think there was no obligation. They never made it famous. I'm keeping their name out of it because I think they didn't want to be known like this.
Yeah.
But it was one of these things where, if anything, I maybe didn't have the best opinion of this person as a celebrity, but I
Yeah.
came away, and I was blown away, was
Yeah.
blown away. And it's also funny too. There was a person who, they were an older kid, and they were thinking about what they wanted to study as they're kind of coming out of high school and into college, and they wanted to be in finance, and they really respected this person who was like let's call them a titan in finance, and who had made billions with a B of dollars, and they just want to know if they could meet the person. And not only did we eventually get a hold of the person, but they agreed to meet, and then they fully funded a whole bunch of wishes. So just because we asked, and so I think for those of you that are listening, if you ever want to wonder about, is making a donation to Make a Wish valuable, it absolutely is. I think the families feel it, the Wish kids feel it, those of us that can help facilitate feel it. It's a really really a fantastic foundation.
Yeah. It sounds like you really get exposed to uh, the human spirit in a very positive way. That, not only is
Mhm.
a tragedy occurring, but then you have somebody that's willing to make such a difference. That's got to be inspiring for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely. I also learned, because it was COVID and we were getting wishes for, instead of getting on an airplane, could we have an RV trip? There was like an RV shortage during COVID.
Yeah.
It was so hard to find them.
Yeah.
So, things that I would never have thought about in my life. You get to think about during that time frame.
So tell us a little bit about, what are you using any AI tools, and working with companies and leaders to become better leaders? What AI
Mhm.
tools are you looking at to help you with that?
So we the I actually start usually by saying I could not run the leadership studio without AI. I'm at a point now where I've integrated the tools so much, and that I just literally couldn't do it. I don't have the time or bandwidth to be able to do some of the things. And we have a few tools that we use now. The first one that we ever built was, it was important to me in the leadership studio, because we're doing our approach and our methods are homegrown and home built. It was important to me that we also have a way to assess potential candidates, or even just leaders that are looking for some more insights into themselves, that we have a way to assess them in ways that kind of rooted back into how we would think about how we would coach them. And so we built a leadership assessment, that something similar to like a Myers-Briggs or DISC, but it's it's proprietary to us. So we built that and build the algorithm. And I have an AI tool that catches the input. So someone takes the assessment, it catches the input, it analyzes it, it kind of understands, okay, based on what I'm seeing here and this kind of score and this kind of score that they're going to fit into this archetype, and that helps me translate into and that. So that was the first tool, and I built that one not because I I couldn't do the work by hand. It's just it's so tedious. And if a whole bunch of people take the survey at once, it could be days before you get a response just because of me trying to go through with like a digital abacus at that point, trying to just slide through. And so that was the first one I built. But the one that we use the most, that we're the most proud of, is we call it Studio Coach, and so it's an AI agent, for lack of a better word, that we, as we're coaching individuals, particularly if we're doing individual coaching versus cohort coaching, that it's coaching they have access to between sessions. And so it's a custom GPT, right? That or the engine of it is a custom GPT, and we built it so that it's fully trained in how we coach and the language we use and the tools we use, and we've added some new functionality over the time. And what it gives the user is, you have an hour with me this week, you have an hour with me next week, but 2 days from now you've got something comes up that's making you feel uneasy as a leader, or you have a situation that you just could use some advice on. You can go to Studio Coach. You can say, here's what I'm seeing, here's my approach, here's my thinking in it, and it will give advice in the same way that I would, or anyone else coaching through the Leadership Studio would. So that's the one we're the most proud of. That's the one we've gotten some recognition for, because it's, for me, it's helped me extend reach, and it helps kind of reinforce the coaching that we're doing in between sessions, which we just, I don't have the time to do, for individuals. So that's the one I know is the most used, because it's the one I get the most feedback on, and I get people asking for, could it do this? Could we add this? And thankfully the capabilities of these AI tools has been advancing at such a pace that we've been able to mostly keep up with new functionality requests. And even though I've been in tech for a long time, I'm not technical. So the ability for me to build these things has been uh, it's been great, frustrating because I am not technical. So I have, for every 3 or 4 great things I've done, I've had to pull my hair out 2 a.m. session trying to figure out what's gone right or wrong. But it's been really good. And we have some ideas on some new things to kind of add in terms of tools. And we have a kind of a niche business at the Leadership Studio as well, that's more around helping people improve resumes, and kind of think about getting them set up for the right job, and that's very AI driven, right? That's the I'm happy to sit down with individuals and work with them, but we want the work to be done by the AI, because that's done in seconds, and we can, if there's even one where they can get a response back in seconds, and I don't even have to touch it, right? So it's very, very powerful the way these tools work these days.
So this AI tool that you just described, is that something that you just use internally, or are you going to take it to market?
So the Studio Coach one, we have it in market per se. So
Yeah.
if someone signs up for coaching, they get access to it. The There's one piece of functionality in it that I really enjoy it being in there, that I haven't yet figured out how to take it, is if I put it into an app. I haven't figured out how to do that yet, but that's on the roadmap. That's find something wooden to knock on. That should be a 2026 deliverable, because that would be really great too, if we could have a Studio Coach be out there in the world that anyone can use, even if they aren't coming to me straight for coaching, just to have like a coach in your pocket to kind of help you through specific areas. And I have people that use it in ways that I hadn't expected. And to be fair, we had to put some guardrails, because I also realized there was some leakage if you could use it in a way that would creep into other parts of my business. So we had to put some good guardrails in there too.
Yeah, interesting. So tell us a little bit about executive presence. I noticed that came up when I was looking into the work that
Mhm.
you do, and so and a lot of professionals struggle with this. So tell us what executive presence is, and what you do to help people improve it.
Yeah, this was one thing that frustrated me a lot when I was growing up as a leader, is that you would get feedback to say, oh, you need to improve your executive presence, and I'd say, great, tell me more, give me something specific. And often what I was hearing was you would be given feedback about where it wasn't. So rather than say do this, it would say don't do that. And that's it's helpful, but it's not great, right? Because it's hard to figure out how do you get there. So when I talk about presence as a concept, I think of it as kind of like it's the experience of your leadership. Like it's how it plays out in those areas. And so we want, a leader that has strong presence is a leader that can deliver messages with clarity, right? So you can say what you mean and mean what you say, that you can create connection to your audience, and that you can you are trusted. And I think one of the things about executive presence, or presence just in general, is that I use this term leadership gravity, right? So when a leadership has strong presence, it kind of pulls people in, and so one thing you'll see is that if there's something good or something bad that's occurring, but people are seeking more information about it, they're going to go to that leader, even if it's not their own leader. They're going to seek out the leader that they believe has, even if they cannot articulate the thing that they have that they're seeking, it's kind of pulled them in. And so it's, the other way I would say is that it's not about being loud. It's not about having to hold the floor. It's not about just the person that has great slides. In fact, I would say you can have no slides and have great presence. So I think when we really focus on how to build people up, there's another piece in this, which is confidence, right? I think in order to have great presence, you have to be confident in yourself and your own abilities.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that we do early on in every coaching engagement is we kind of talk to people about where do they feel confident, where do they not, like what type of situation or what type of speech, whatever thing that's out there. And then through kind of practical exercises, we'll test those a little bit. So if they tell me they feel very confident in a prepared speech, well, then give me a prepared speech. And if tell me they feel confident in an improvised speech, we'll do that. And then we'll stress it, and we'll introduce variables, or we'll reduce time, and we'll start to kind of figure out where are they showing up in the best way, and then where do they have opportunities for us to help them improve.
Mhm. It's interesting when I think of that, in real life, you see this happen all the time. Remember the old commercial way back when, where it says, I think it was like, when E.F. Hutton speaks, everybody listens.
Yeah.
And I've seen this in meetings before, in groups before, where when somebody talks, people can't wait to say the next thing, or they're restless, or, whatever. And then every once in a while, this other person will talk, and it's silence, and you can tell that everyone is just deeply listening. And to me, that's kind of, that person has presence when they speak.
Hmm.
People really are listening and taking that in, and you don't do that overnight. I'm sure you got to build that up over time, and build trust, and build, time with people so that they can feel that way. But it's pretty cool when you see it.
Yeah. The one thing I think about for sure is that when you have strong presence, it's that people will come to you, or people will follow you regardless of organizational lines. So the very, like the same thing you're saying, like when someone speaks and you listen, that plays out most powerfully when it's not the most important person in the room, right?
Yeah.
Because when that person speaks, people feel an obligation to maybe shut up and listen. But when it's someone who isn't in that chair, then I think it speaks even more powerfully that they've reached a level, organizationally or not, that they've created this presence, this authority, right, that they're speaking from, that people really really value.
Another thing I found too, where you talk about how indecision is really kind of the silent killer of leadership, and I
Hmm.
think you have a World War II story, or something to share about decisive leadership.
Yeah, and so this is my of all of the keynotes and things that I can talk about. This is the one that I love the most. So the short version I'll give you is that in 1943 there was a flight of B-17s that were taking off from England, and they were going to go make a bombing run over Germany. And the head of the overall flight it was his first time to do that. And because there was low cloud cover, which is largely to be expected over England, but this is October 43, and so even more so, he hesitated. So the B-17's kind of they're orbiting over England, and he's hesitating until the clouds broke, and then the clouds broke, and then they took off. But that hesitation created when you're flying, you burn gas, right? So that hesitation meant that the radius of coverage for their fighter support shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. And so it meant that the planes that were escorting them could not take them all the way to where they were bombing and all the way back. They had to cut short, which meant that in a daylight raid, the bombers made the run, they dropped their bombs, and then the whole way back, they were just getting, decimated by German fighters. So this indecision, right, it had a real impact. People lost life. And then the other side of the story is about decisive, like really truly being decisive. So one plane in particular took a bunch of fire, and an individual on the plane was very, very badly wounded. And remember, these are kids, right? These aren't like seasoned veterans. These are the
Yeah.
oldest person on the plane, I think, was 27 or something, right? These are children. And the pilot made the decision that this person was wounded enough that he's not going to make it back to England. Let's give him some chance. He's unconscious, is bleeding. Let's put him in a parachute and push him out the door. And because they were over Holland at the time, so they push him out the door, and he's unconscious. He gets picked up by the Dutch underground, who pick him up, and they say, okay, he's too badly wounded, so they leave him for the Germans, which is sounds bad, but it was the right thing to do. So the Germans keep him in a hospital for a month in Holland, and they ship him to a POW camp where he spends the rest of the war. But he spends the rest of the war, right? He survived his wounds, um, and then he goes on to have a great life. Like, he spends 30 years in the Air Force. He goes to NASA. He has kids. He has grandkids. But that plane that was being shot, that he was in, that they pushed him out, they never made it back. Right? So they crashed in the English Channel. Everyone else in that plane died. So two big factors in this thing, right? So the first guy who said, I'm worried about the cloud cover. It's my first time. I want it to all go right. Him having that indecisive moment had a direct and indirect impact, right? Because it meant that they didn't have the support they needed. And then the captain of the airplane making the decision to push the other person had a very profound impact, right? Because that one person who was badly wounded actually survived, and no one else did on that plane. And it's personally impactful to me because that turns out that's my grandfather, right? So if
Oh
he's
my
not pushed
God.
out that plane, I'm not here to have this conversation with you at all. So it's, I think a lot about leaders need to make decisions, leaders need to act, and it's okay if it's the wrong decision in the moment, but making a decision is so much better than just hemming and hawing and waiting for the perfect conditions to come around.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy. What I wasn't expecting that you were related to the person when you were telling the story, so that makes it even more impactful. When you think back over your career and developing these leadership skills and whatever, I would assume you had some mentors. What mentors do you remember, and what did they teach you?
Yeah, I think the I've been I've been blessed, right, to have great coaches and mentors in my lifetime, in my career. I think the one I think of the most was a boss I had at HP named Lance St. Clair. And the reason I think of Lance is because Lance was there when I made the transition into an executive role. And even though I certainly felt like I deserved it and I had earned it, he was there to remind me that from Monday when I didn't have the title to Tuesday when I did, that my voice got louder, whether I accepted that or not, whether I understood that or not, that because I had this new title or this bigger role, that when I said things, that my voice carried weight tomorrow that it didn't carry yesterday. And that was really interesting to me, because for me nothing had changed other than got this promotion that I thought I had already deserved. But it was powerful. He gave me a lot of like, he's very South Texas and has a lot of a lot of years in tech, and so he had a lot of expressions so that I still use in my life. But him being there as a great example, him being there to be very blunt at times. I famously made a few. I still get sort of cringe thinking about some times when I felt like I had done just a great analogy, and we walk out and he says, "Don't ever do that again," and I have to I have to think about that. But that willingness, right, to also tell me, to coach me, even if it's like really really tough. I think that's a something I really value in Lance. And then we had great opportunities to kind of travel to various places around the world together. So I got to kind of see his style play out in different cultures too. And that taught me about, when do I need to hold true to exactly who I am versus when should I adapt? And I think an adaptive leader is really, really powerful. But and then the last thing I'll say about Lance is that his ability to connect with senior leaders was really unique to me because of HP was this huge company, like the biggest tech company in the world at one point, right? Maybe 300,000 employees, this massive, massive, massive company before the split. And his ability to connect with leaders who were well above us, and he really had a great connection with Meg Whitman, who was our CEO at the time. And on paper, that should never have existed. And there was that where he was in the organization, where she was in the organization, that kind of his ability to connect with her and have a strong connection there should never have happened. Like it just doesn't exist. And so that was something really powerful that I took from him is that you know creating connections with humans, understanding the value of having that interchange. It plays out over a long time, for me it was amazing to kind of have a front row seat to watch some of those things. And then I learned a lot of things, and there's things that I emulate from him, and there's things that I could never be the way he is too. So he gives me great examples in terms of how I want to be and how I just can't do because it's not who I am too.
Yeah. 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 Interesting. So, in anticipation of our discussion today, is there anything that I haven't asked you or we haven't covered that you want to be sure and get in the program today?
No, I think this has been a fantastic conversation. I think we're at the Leadership Studio. We're happy to help anyone, individuals and groups, and I use the term leader a lot. But leader is unrelated to title. So I think you can easy example is usually like a program manager. They frequently have to do big things and drive big change, but often don't have anyone reporting to them. But to me, that's a leader, and they're also could benefit from the types of things we do. And anyone that's got to connect and deliver a message for me is someone that we can help. So I loved having the conversation here today. I think we covered a lot of ground, but for me, I really enjoy these opportunities just to talk with someone else about the things that we see and value and what we see out there in the world, and how do we make people better.
For sure, for sure. So, at this point in the interview, I always ask my guests the same common question, and that question is, in relation to leadership, what is a pearl of wisdom that you could leave us with today?
I'll do two things. I think one question that I get all the time, maybe it's not 100%, but it's pretty close, is what's the one skill a leader needs to have to be effective? And of course, the answer is there's not one skill. But if I want to talk about an attribute that leaders need to really ensure they can make sure they're getting better all the time is introspection. The ability to look inside yourself and take a critical eye. Here's where I'm good. Here's where I'm not. And understand who you are so that you know exactly how to show up in the right moments. I think that's very, very important. And I do think it's overlooked far too often. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is just this came from a very specific time in my career, but it's an expression I've used now for, I don't know, 16, 17 years. But we should speak up. So the expression I use is you almost never get what you don't ask for.
Yeah.
And I think as like we're thinking about careers or life, for sure luck happens, right? And sometimes you just being great at your job means that the person above you will see that and promote you. But I think if you're unwilling to make your intentions known, then people might not think you yourself think you're ready. And that played out 100% exactly like that at one point in my career where I had never said to the right people, this is what I want to do. And so when that opportunity came open, I wasn't even asked, and it pissed me off. But I
Yeah,
learned from it, and I think it's a great learning. So be willing to speak for yourself. Be willing to be your own advocate. No one else is going to do it better than you can.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. One of my mottos has always been, I said, I'm never afraid to ask the question. And
Mhm.
so, it's a good thing to remember because you're right. You sit back waiting for someone else to make your case or make you be in a position where you can really learn and grow, and you don't take it. A lot of times you miss it. It goes by you.
Yep,
So I would agree.
absolutely.
Well, Crispin, this has been a great discussion. I think you and I think a lot alike on these leadership ideas, and it's great to see that you've created a company, the Leadership Studio, that's helping people find it. We need more of that, as we discussed, and sounds like you're doing good things. So appreciate your time today, and it's great having this discussion with you.
Yeah, likewise. Had a great time.
Okay, well, have a good rest of your day, and maybe we'll meet each other down the road one of these days.
Good stuff.
Okay, take care. Bye bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of Profiles in Leadership. To listen to all my interviews, subscribe to Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson on Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and many other popular podcast platforms. Some of these interviews are on video, and you can search YouTube for Profiles in Leadership with Steve Anderson. You can also access the entire library of interviews on my website, orange.coaching.com, and that is orangetheword.coaching.com, and go to the Media Center and click on Podcasts or Video Gallery. You can also enter the website from pilpodcast.com.